again, I'm going to say it pisses me off when somebody says, well, across the board, I'm going to say that if you're over this age, then you're no longer useful. And so therefore you cannot be participating in blah, blah, blah. If they run along with me, even somebody at 40 years old, they would say, how is he doing it? How can he do it? I'm always in a hurry. Come to my house, get up at 5:30 in the morning and then be in a hurry. I hope you can keep up with me because it's going to be busy.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Executive Health and Life. I'm your host, Julian Hayes II, back at it again, as I always say, with a fascinating guest. And my guest is definitely a fascinating individual today. And today we're talking about succeeding against the odds and whatever those odds may be in your life, because they're going to look different for each of us. But to thrive and to turn the obstacle into an opportunity. And before I go any further, my guest is described in his first book as someone when in a difficult situation, he raises his game. When others would be lost, he increases his focus. So my guest today is John Brink, who was born during the Second World War in northeastern Holland. Since then, John has gone on to become a serial entrepreneur as a CEO and owner of over 10 companies. He's also a best-selling author of 3 books, host of the On the Brink podcast series, a business mentor, philanthropist, nationally ranked bodybuilder, keynote speaker, enjoys riding dressage, and an animal welfare advocate. Most importantly, he's a great human being who is focused on helping people unlock their potential. I secretly think he's a superhero. But nevertheless, John, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Julian. How about you?
I'm super fantastic. I'm living the dream. As I told you earlier, it's a blessing to just be able to do something like this. So there's no complaints over here.
But same for me.
So, I'm curious, at 83 years young right now, what continues to inspire you to run a portfolio of companies? You have more than 400 employees and overall just live a very active and engaging life.
Yeah, it's interesting because, the key is to stay mentally, physically, and obviously with business and all the things around me, I'm an active individual. I was like today, I get up at 5:30 and I always think I'm late. I always make my bed and I'm excited about the day because every day to me is a good day. And so that's what I did, and that's how I started. Where it all kind of started is you mentioned it on the intro. I was born in adversity to a certain extent, and I had encountered numerous challenges, as many others have. But I was born November the 1st, 1940, and so I'm in my 84th year. I'll turn 84 November the 1st this year. And then I've been blessed with, through challenges likely, of being very careful about my diet, staying active, and I have had an abundance of energy. I still do that today. And my dream was when I was 5 years old that kind of started forming because, again, visualize Northern Holland, Northeastern Holland in particular. I was born during the war, and we were liberated by the Canadian Army, April the 12th, 1945. And it made such an impression on this little guy, 5 years old, that I knew from that point forward I would go to the land of my heroes, Canada. And I knew that, and that never left me. And I tried to go when I was 17. My parents wouldn't let me then. I was drafted into the Dutch Air Force for about 30 months and then started building a career in Holland. But then I went to Canada with a suitcase, 3 books, 2 sets of clothes, wanted to start from nothing when I was 23 years old. And that was in July 1965. And the dream that I had then, Julian, is when I wanted to build a lumber mill because my grandfather was a master carpenter. I tell you a little bit later, I was 13 when I left school, or I failed school actually. Academically, I was not a success story. Let's get it all out there in saying I failed grade 3 and then did that twice, and then I failed grade 7 3 times. And so they said, what are you going to do with this guy? Do we send him to the mentally challenged school, or should we get him a job of some sort and build a profession? And my parents were beautiful individuals, so they sent me to a furniture store, a furniture factory. And And in the evenings, I would go to school to learn to become a furniture maker. And at 13, and that served me well, actually. And so, but in a way, kids are hard on each other. My friends that I had in grade 7 went on to college and to university, and I became a laborer, and it was looked down on. I'm proud of that today, but then it was not all that cool. And so, and I kind of felt although even then I was always optimistic, always had the same go-go attitude, was selling and delivering papers and always making a bit of money, entrepreneurial right from the start, more or less. And but I kind of felt inside I was as good as all the other individuals that went to college and university, but I had to prove it to myself. That's what I felt. And so when I was 23 and 1965, I went to the land of my heroes, Canada, and I wanted to start with nothing. So I took $150, took a suitcase, 3 books, 2 sets of clothes, couldn't speak the language, didn't know a soul, didn't have a job. But one thing that I did know is that on the western part of Holland, of Canada, was British Columbia, and that's where they have all the timber. So I arrived in Vancouver, Canada, in July of 1965, and I went to the immigration department, and fortunately there was a German fellow there, and I could speak some German. I explained to him what I wanted to do. I wanted to build a lumber mill. He said, go to Prince George. Now, for a guest watching, he said, well, where is Prince George? Now, British Columbia is a big province in Canada, and Canada is beautiful, obviously. And Vancouver is known by most people, and Prince George is 500 miles north of Vancouver, or 800 kilometers for our friends in Europe. And so, as I arrived here in Prince George and came off the Greyhound bus, 14 hours on the bus. And so I stepped out with my suitcase, my 3 books, 2 sets of clothes. I counted my money at least 3 times. I had exactly $25.47. But I had lots of his attitude. No matter what happens, if today is a tough day, I swear it'd be a great day tomorrow. And that's always been my attitude. Passion. Whatever I do, I give it 150%. And then the other one is work ethic. And I work harder than anybody. And even in my 84th year, I still do that today. And what will follow is success. And so that's how I started. And then you say, well, what did you do? Then come off the bus, 2547. Well, obviously, I had a cash flow issue. So again, I went to the immigration department here. And fortunately, again, there was a fellow that had a Dutch background, could speak some Dutch. And I wanted a job. He said, well, when do you want to start? I said, tonight. Because obviously I have to start a gas. And so they found me a job in Quesnel. That was about 75 miles south of Prince George. So I thought I'd just take the bus like I do in Holland, right? Every 20 minutes is a bus. No, not here. Twice a day, maybe. And so I went to the highway in now visualize this, Julian, with my gray pants, my black shoes, my white shirt, my tie, my under jacket, and then my black double-breasted jacket and a beautiful European raincoat. And I went to the highway with my suitcase and hijacked to Quesnel. Now, they must have thought, who is this guy? No wonder that so few people stopped, but finally somebody stopped. And I couldn't speak the language, so I could hear what he said. Where do you want to go? I said, Greyhound station, because we stopped that on the way up. And so he dropped me off at the Greyhound station. I then called the person in the immigration department had me lined up with, the personnel manager for the lumber mill in Quesnel that would hire me. He came down to get me, in fact, found me a place for board and room. And that evening, I went to the mill in my gray pants, black jacket, white shirt, tie, and double-breasted jacket. I took my raincoat off, and then Now, the mill, was a plywood plant as well as a lumber mill, and they probably employed about 200 people on a shift there. Every single one came down to look at this crazy individual that in his beautiful shirt and his gray pants was piling lumber at the end of the chain. And people are not nice sometimes. They try to bury you, but they didn't have any clue what my agenda was. I was already building the mill, and nobody was going to bury me. And so, and the first coffee break, I took my tie off and took my jacket off, and so I stayed there for about a month. It's all in my book, actually, Against All Odds. And then I went to a mill here in Prince George, and then within less than a year, I was the superintendent of that mill, and that didn't go fast enough. 2 years later, I got another mill, of all places, where I became part owner, stayed in a motel, bought a motel. And you say, well, hey, John, where was that? That was in the Yukon Territory. And then where is the Yukon Territory? Well, with all due respect to those that may, if you look at the map of Canada, then you see British Columbia on the east side and on the west side, and then above that is the Yukon. Right next to it is Alaska. Now, for a fellow coming from Holland, moderate temperatures. The coldest, I was there for 5 years being the manager of Watson Lake Lumber and owned a motel. The coldest that I saw there, be ready for this one, I told you earlier, today here it's 13 below zero. 2 weeks ago, it was 42 below zero. I saw there 62 below zero. So it was a cold, cold place. And but I was there for 5 years, and then it's all in my book. I gave it all away for $1, and then went back to Prince George, and then started over again, drive forklift truck, pile lumber, do that other. And then within 5 years thereafter, I started my company, the Brink Group of Companies, and the rest kind of is history. But a lot of water went under the bridge. But the key point, Julian, is attitude, passion, work ethic. I will never, never, never give up. I stay the course, and I get up at 5:30 in the morning. I always think I'm late. I always leave things organized behind me so that in the evening when I come back from work, all of that feels good. I walk into my bedroom, and and the bed is nicely made, and there I am. So and I just love it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, but I'm going to jump around for a lot of different time points here. But the first thing I'm going to start with is we're going to discuss passion, and in particular from your latest book, Finding Your Passion, Living the Dream. And you mentioned that attitude plus passion plus work ethic inevitably leads to success. So, what does passion mean to you?
Correct. But does passion mean to me is that, and I say that in a lot of presentations that I do, in particular to young people. I give presentation to colleges, to university, whatever it is, or whatever setting it is. And I talk to a lot of young people and say, what do you want to do as you go forward in life? And they say, well, I don't know. Well, how are you going to find out? I said, I recommend, as I did, right from an early age, obviously we were liberated by the Canadians, and that then became, where do I want to be located? The other thing that I did, even then already, although I was not a successful story in academically, but I want to listen to everybody that gave presentations that were successful in business. I want to listen to them and see what made them click. I did that already from a young age forward, and still do that today, actually. And so what I say to the young people that I give presentations to, that it is important to find a direction in life. Where do you want to go? So you want to be a truck driver, talk to truck drivers and find out what makes it click. What are the pluses? What are the minuses? You want to be a mechanic, talk to a mechanic guy. You want to be a lawyer, talk to a lawyer. You want to be an accountant, talk to an accountant. Or even then, you want to be an entrepreneur, talk to entrepreneurs, because what you will find, I tell them, that most of them are quite willing to talk to you about the ups, the downs, the pluses, and the minuses, and give you an idea. So you form an opinion of direction. Now, for me, what it did, obviously, is that had an attachment to lumber because my grandfather was a master carpenter. My dad managed a small lumber company. And then I worked in a furniture factory and I was good at it. And so I loved lumber, still do today, as one. Now, in the companies that I'm involved in today, the one is lumber, is one silo. The other silo is warehousing, distribution, and logistics. And the other silo is real estate, commercial, and industrial. Those are my main three silos. And then there's some other companies around it. So, but obviously I developed nearly 70 years in the forest industry from the time that I was 13. I'm now approaching 84. I worked in the industry directly for 70 years. And right from the beginning, I wanted to figure out what made it click, what made them successful. Now, the other question that you likely will ask me is that, what were the 3 books that you had with you when you were 23 years old and came from Holland to why were those 3 books so important? Well, the one was Management by Drucker. I admired him and his thoughts. The other one was Logical Thinking, and the other one was a book about Canada. Those were the 3 books. And so from there on in, I always virtually followed the same path. Now, the other part that I believe would be important, I had an advantage over a lot of people, although it initially was likely a liability in the sense that I still hadn't proved to myself that I was as good as anybody else and that went to college, university. And why was that? Well, because I failed grade 3 and then grade 7. So that piece became clear to me when I was here already for 32 years. It was 1997. January of 1997, I already was successful in business. Everybody said, "Oh, you're so successful," and blah, blah, blah. I didn't feel that way. I felt even then that I had failed. And I walked into a bookstore here in Prince George, and I picked up a book. I still don't know why I did it. And the book's title was Driven to Distraction by Dr. Halliwell. And it was about ADHD. And I said, "Oh my God, that's me." And I wrote it in the book in Dutch because I was ashamed of it, because it was potentially implied as a mental disorder. And I wrote it in there. And so the more I got to know about it, the more clear it became to me, Googling it and researching. And so after about 5 years, can you imagine? And when I was 57, then I was 62, I went into my doc's office, who was a personal friend, delivered our 2 daughters. And he said, "Hey, John, why are you here?" I said, "I think I got ADHD." So we checked it out together, and yes, I do. And then the more I found out about it, I knew it was a superpower. And so then I felt more and more about it. I included it, not exclusively, but in my presentations that I do, and I wrote a book about it. ADHD Unlocked, quite popular actually. So now that then made it clear to me what my issues were in terms of attention, or conventional, as we know, the learning system or the schooling system that we have in all different levels, is that I was much more effective in what I was doing with my hands, and then developing the skill sets that I required as I went older. And so I call it a superpower. And today, a lot of people say to me, "Oh, with all the things that you got 10 companies, and then you write books, and you give presentations, and you're so active. How do you do it?" I say, "ADHD. That's why." And so that became a big part of my life. So.
Well, there actually is because before this episode, I was actually curious about this. And so there actually is a lot of research, and actually more CEOs and entrepreneurs than you would expect actually do have ADHD.
So I'd like to mention this that you may find interesting, Julian. So the book that I picked up in January of 1997 was written by Dr. Halliwell. ADHD, I may add. And so I interviewed him 2 weeks ago on my podcast. And one of the discussion, and for anybody that has an interest in ADHD, and we all should for a number of reasons that will become clear as we go forward, is that, so one of the things I mentioned to him is initially when I started looking at it, I felt 8% of the population was affected by ADHD from the things that I read way back then. I believe that it is more than 20%. And then when I had my discussion with Dr. Halliwell, he said, no, John, it's more than 25%. And I agree with him. And then the other part that we discussed is that I believe, I mentioned to him, that 50% of the successful, and the operative here is the successful entrepreneurs, are affected or benefit from ADHD. He said, no, John, it likely is more than 75% of successful entrepreneurs. That's what I believe as well.
Wow.
In fact, we are so far, Julian, that I advertised for one of my companies across Canada and senior management level. I put in the ad, ADHD considered to be an asset.
I've never heard that, but
Yes.
I mean, that makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah, that all makes sense. And those numbers are surprising, but I'm not shocked after hearing it and then actually thinking about it. Because if you think about the things that an entrepreneur is going to do, and you think about someone with ADHD, it's kind of a match made in heaven.
You're absolutely right. And saying, hey, John, what do you have then, what in your mind, talking to myself, that other people don't have? But if I know a lot of entrepreneurs because I've been around them all my life, and they are very, very well educated and they're very well trained. But my training was different than theirs, although, so more in real life. And so what I do, if the box is here, of the skill sets that we develop and that we go into the workplace with after we get ready for that, or entrepreneurship, is that I always look outside of that box as to where else can we go, what else can we do. It makes other people very uncomfortable because they're not used to being outside of the box.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I do. I'm a strategic thinker. I go forward 5, 10, 15, 20 years. No matter when, I always look at other options. What can we do? How should we do it? And do those kind of things. And that is typical for the ADHD entrepreneurs or CEOs.
Mm-hmm. I believe that, going to your book, Against All Odds, and there was around 10 lessons, I believe, in there. And one of the lessons actually was a little bit about this, where it's your past and liabilities don't define you. And it's actually chapter 1. And a lot of times people would say initially that, oh, I have ADHD, I have these things right there. And you turned a negative that society likes to place on you into a superpower. And what advice do you have for people to start shifting their mindset like this as well when it comes to perceived limitations that people put on them?
I agree. So the other thing that I'm going to just share with you, you may find this interesting. So I wrote 3 books, and my 4th one is coming out here, I think in July. And is that, the most important part is that not so much age, but quality of life. And that became very, very important to me. So this is the one that will be coming out in July, August, and living young, dying old. And so, that's the critical part. And so being aware of healthy living, exercise, and that precious body that we have will take a certain amount of abuse, but then at some point, it will say no more, and all of a sudden, then we become affected by it and are no longer effective, or cannot longer, the quality of life is no longer there the way it can be or should be. And I saw an article, actually, Julian, that was in one of the books that I read, maybe, or So it said that this doc looked at a study that was done of 100,000 people, did a biopsy of them after they passed away, and not a single one of them died of old age.
Hmm.
And that's food for thought.
That will mind bend a lot of people who have this perception of what it means to get older chronologically. It's a whole different notion, chronologically, biologically.
Yeah, and the thing, I'm going to be very open about this, and maybe shouldn't say it, but really, and I usually don't say this, I'm really pissed off about if I hear people talking about somebody over 80 is no longer usable or useful. Need a nurse to hold them. Does that look like I need one? I'm nearly 84. And so to suggest by media, including my dear friend Cooper Anderson, that I want to get on his podcast actually, but anyway, that's talking about a lot of things. But everybody is accepting in the United States in particular that maybe it's because of the politics that they have between 77 years old and 80 years or 81. Like Biden is 3 or 4 years younger than me. I anytime would take a challenge from anybody, 50 or 60 years old, to go with me to the gym. I'm the oldest competitive bodybuilder in North America. And I will be going to the Arnold's as I did in qualified for in 2018. I will do that now in 2025. So I believe that to suggest that anybody over a certain age, it's not about that. It's not the number. The issue is quality of life. And so every time I hear that and saying, well, he's this and that, so therefore he's no longer suitable, he doesn't have, he forgot a thing or two, and I'm not political in any way whatsoever. That's not what I'm talking about. But again, I'm going to say it pisses me off when somebody says, well, across the board, I'm going to say that if you're over this age, then you're no longer useful. And so therefore you cannot be participating in blah, blah, blah. If they run along with me, even somebody at 40 years old, they would say, how is he doing it? How can he do it? I'm always in a hurry. Come to my house, get up at 5:30 in the morning, and then be in a hurry. I hope you can keep up with me because it's going to be busy.
I can feel the energy. I can feel the energy just from the start that you would run circles around 95% of the people around my city right now. I guarantee you would run circles around them.
But I say they can at least do part of that as well. Read my book, Living Young, Dying Old. Think about diet. What are you doing about diet? It's mainly plant-based. I don't believe in processed food. So if I go to a grocery store, I never go to the middle. It's all the processed food. I don't want that. I go to the outside. It's mainly plant-based. And then I go to the gym. I'm a bodybuilder in physique, and that doesn't have to be that way. Walk half an hour, 20 minutes a day, and it will make a huge difference on your life. Make sure your mind is positive. Believe in the positive. Don't belabor negatives. If it is raining today and I want sunshine, I'll swear it's sunshine tomorrow. No question about it in my mind. That's the way it is. And those kind of things, combination of all of those is important. And the book here, Living Young, Dying Old, is going to be, I'm going to have on the side there, I am 84 then, years young. That's what will be on the side of the book. The rest will look like this. But obviously I said it already several times, but it turns me off is that I hear it over and over and over again, especially on U.S. news, saying, well, he's 80 this and 80 that, and then therefore he is he made him, I'm not political, Biden, Trump, well, I'm not a big fan of Trump for obvious reasons, but, but in terms of physical health, I think all of this is available to us to a certain extent. If we just understood it a bit more, but processed foods are simply not good for you. Getting enough sleep is important. Getting some exercise. This precious body, extremely forgiving, but it will not take abuse for a prolonged period of time. It can't. And then all of a sudden, if it is 40, 50, 60, whatever it is, then it says no more.
So,
And
I have a question on the this is a thing that you probably hear a lot talking to other entrepreneurs. They tell you that they have to just work and hustle and they'll sleep when they're dead. They don't have time to sleep. So how do you what do you do to kind of dispel that myth to them about the importance of sleep and just a healthy lifestyle? Because a lot of business owners don't take care of themselves that well at times.
But you don't. So but it's important to me. I usually sleep between 7 and 8 hours a night. So I don't drink, I don't smoke, and I don't do drugs, and I don't drink alcohol of any sort. At one point, I had a period where I was drinking more than was good for me. So, and I got out of that about 15 years ago. I forget now how many, but so I'm very careful with my life, but I try to sleep and I sleep well. I look at being proactive in medicine to the extent of preventive. I'm extremely interested. So is my wife, who is a vegan. I'm probably 80-20, approaching 90-20 actually. But, so I'm very careful with the diet, and sleeping to me is important. And then in terms of how do I work, is that we are very fortunate that quite a number of years ago, when I had other companies in other provinces, we relocated our primary home in Victoria. And you likely know where Victoria is, on Vancouver Island in the Lower Mainland. And so we have a beautiful house there. What I usually do is on Friday afternoons, I leave here and then I go back, fly back to Victoria, stay there for the weekend, come back to Prince George here, usually 11 o'clock Monday mornings. And during the weekends, I do other stuff rather than doing my daily thing, running and behind companies. And I work on things that I like to do. Podcasting is one of them, or getting ready for it, or writing books. I'm still working on 2 other books. The one is Living Young, Dying Old. The other one is about the forest industry. Those are hobbies that I do. And then we also have 7 horses. We do English dressage. But I don't believe that you have to. At one point, I did, early in my life, I worked 24/7. That's not healthy and not always effective either, because you start doing things and you don't focus enough on the things that are important and critical. So at this point in my life, and already earlier, when probably in my 60s, I knew I had to remove myself from my daily business grind and then find other hobbies that would give me a break, and so that I stay mentally positive and healthy.
How did you get interested in bodybuilding?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Julian. Is that I was one of those guys, right up to the time in 2008, is a critical date here, is that I was overweight. I was not overly healthy, working too much, too long. And then I got a case of diverticulitis. I don't know if you're familiar with it or not. It's a breach in the colon. A lot of people have it and they clean up their diet and so on, and then it's okay. But in my case, it was a breach. So then the toxins go into your system. You have about 48 hours to clean it up before you die. And so I came this close. And so then up to that point, I was one of those guys, especially at the end of the year, you make these commitments. You're going to do this, that, and this thing, and then you're going to go to the gym. And you do that for 2 weeks, and then you find 100 reasons as why you're too busy to go to the gym. And then you do the same all over again the following year. So then I knew what I had to do is I had to become much more serious about diet together. My wife already was vegan and lecturing me, but then I became more serious about it, fortunately. And then at the same time, I went to the gym, but I got a trainer. And my life is appointments. And if I have an appointment, I do everything that I can to meet that appointment. That's what I do. And so I did that for about 6 years in the gym, and going in a serious way, not tittle-tattling around. And, no, I went there to work. And so somebody came up to me and said, have you ever thought about competing? I said, me? And I said, well, why not? So I started competing and getting ready for competition. And then, before you know it, I competed here in Northern BC, bodybuilding and physique, and came in second bodybuilding, third in physique. Then I got the provincials, came in third in physique, second in bodybuilding. That qualified me for the nationals and the Arnolds. And then obviously COVID came. And then, and then nip and tuck, we still did some, stayed in shape, but not because everything had changed. Now I'm back to it. In fact, right after this podcast, I'm back in the gym again. So, in training again for competing when I'm 85. And I already talked to Arnold about it, and he promised me he would meet with me and we train together and take lots of pictures. I said, good, I'm going to do that.
That's awesome. That is awesome. And so, if I'm around in 2025 time, I'm going to go watch you.
I like it.
Yeah, I'm going to go watch you. That is awesome. That is really inspiring because it's, that kind of bothers me as well, is that a lot of times people put age, this ageism of like, you can't do this training thing anymore. And because you're this age. And I have friends already, which makes no sense. I have people already. I'm in my mid 30s, and you have people already saying, "Oh, well, I'm in my mid 30s now," and so it's just almost like an acceptance of a lower standard.
Yeah, and what turns me off about it, and I know it's politics, and politics is a bad, thing, and they beat each other up, and I'm realistic. I know all of that. But to go out and take categorically across the line, saying that by the time you are 80, whoever, what you have done and whatever, you're done. And I don't accept that. I hear that from CNN, UBC, you name them all, including my friend that I watch a lot of times, Cooper Anderson. I watch them all the time. It turns me off. Yeah, it really does. Because you cannot say that. It does not mean that somebody is useless after that period and should not be considered to be in a responsible role. Give me a break. How much more elementary do you want to get? See a picture of my book here, Come and meet me. Call me on your show and say, hey, John, come talk to us. I love it. Even better yet, I'll put you up in my house and you run around with me for a day and then say 84. By now you should be dead, really. So I don't accept that. I simply don't.
Yeah, I see this, and this is one of the best ways to display leadership. And oftentimes when you're a CEO and entrepreneur, people go by how you act, and by you maintaining this high standard, I can only imagine probably the people around you as well are going to gravitate toward that, and probably you're going to help them rise up as well. And so when it comes to, so my question is, what are some things that you look for when you're determining if someone's a very good leader?
To me, it is. My dad always told me this, that a long time ago. He said, first class, and today you have to say person, but he said then, a good man will always hire a good man. A second class man, not so good, will never hire a first class. So be aware of that. If you excel, right, then always make sure that around you, for me, it is important to, I always say cream comes to the top in my organization, so that I try to find people that are motivated, are team builders, and want to be part of it. And so for me, I cannot be successful alone. Be successful building a team. So that's kind of what I always look for. And then I'm open and like people that are especially committed to growing with us in our organization, then to make them part of it in terms of understanding what we're doing and why we are doing it, and see opportunity. And so we get very excited about all the things, although things are challenging right now and have been obviously for the last 4 or 5 years, but still looking forward, there is lots of opportunity. The other part, Julian, that is very, very important for me is that I grew up during the war years. and I saw and became part of it. When I was born in November 1940, my dad had been drafted into the Dutch Army in April of 1940, and my mother was pregnant with me. I had a sister 1 year older, brother 2 years older, and the last time they heard from him is when he was caught in Rotterdam when it was bombed. And so they didn't know, he likely was dead, but they didn't hear from him, about him, for 5 years. My mother had 3 kids that she grew up with. I still remember from the time I was 3.5, 4 years old, bombers overhead when the Allied forces landed in Normandy in June of 1944. At the same time, bombing of Germany started, and hundreds of bombers would fly over our house, hundreds of them. The sound of it is, we'll never hear it again. And my mother would take the kids outside on a flat roof, not to kind of look at the bombs, but it felt safer to be outside than inside. And in the distance, again, visualize northeastern Holland, we could see Kiel, Bremen, Hamburg, and in the distance, we could see the sky would be red of the places they bombed. And then, the Canadians liberated us April the 12th, 1945, as I said earlier. And we were there during that period. The winter 1944-45 were the hunger winters. And it was extremely cold as well. And so I remember as kids, my brother, my sister, and myself, we would go into the railroad yards with gunny sacks to pick up anything edible and burnable. Why did we as little kids? Because the Germans wouldn't shoot us. They boot us one, but we'd be back the following day. I can still feel now, nearly 78 years later, the hunger feeling is I still can feel that. And the cold, immense cold. And then the other one is anxiety of losing that one single parent that we had, because everybody had the same problems. It was not the neighbors help you out. No, they had their own issues. And, in fact, when I left that, I was still affected by PTSD and the inner child, and got counseling for the inner child actually in my 50s, extremely emotional, but so the point that I'm making is this one, is that today, as we look to the world, and we see, wars in the Central Europe, Ukraine in particular, the Middle East, and other places, that how fortunate we are. I fly a lot in planes and commercial, I'm pilot as well, but flying in commercial airlines in particular through the United States and Canada. I always sit by the window, I look outside and say, it's paradise. It simply is paradise. It cannot get better than we are. And I get frustrated when I hear people talking about, that, or politicians in particular. And if I watch in North America, we're so fortunate. If I hear politicians and they say, well, maybe we should have a dictatorship, go to Russia, go to North Korea, go to Iran, go to Venezuela, go to Cuba, where they load you in Venezuela in particular, I remember, they load you in an airplane and they put you out in the middle of the sea, gone, right? So go to those places if you think that dictatorships is what you want. And the democratic system is not perfect. It has its flaws, but it's better than the alternative, because a dictatorship, all of this, including the Second World War, was started by one singular individual that became the dictator, Hitler. And we became victims, all of us, including the German population, And so beware, be appreciative of our democratic system with all the flaws that it has, but it's better than the alternative. So the other part that I say in terms of war, that some people seem to think that you have war, and then when the war is over, everything goes back to normal. It doesn't. It absolutely doesn't. And I've been there. I know it. It takes not one generation, sometimes two generations. Because after my dad came back from the war, and we were liberated, that relationship was never the same again. He was never the same again. PTSD affected him for the rest of his life.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
appreciate what you have in North America, not you, but in a general sense.
Mm-hmm.
Those, saying how lucky we are. And if you're contemplating, especially if you don't like our political system, I'm not being political, it's not part of who I am, but then the alternatives, the examples are all around us.
I agree. And so I want to quickly touch on, you do a lot of business mentoring as well. And so I'm sure you are asked a lot of questions about business entrepreneurship, probably a lot of the typical questions that one would expect. So I'm curious, what do you wish those people would ask you more when it comes to business and entrepreneurship? Think of this as something that people overlook a lot of times.
A lot of times what happens in business, we are not strategic thinkers, because the system in business, if you have public companies in particular, they have, management structure that is being judged on a quarterly basis, and that lack a lot of times entrepreneurship, or they lack ADHD input for one, but that's the interesting part about it, is that they fear a lot of times anything out of the what they know well. And especially if you go through a period of challenges, but which we have now, and the economy is starting to change, that also means opportunity. So the ability to think forward, or to engage other people, including myself, I think forward. I'm a strategic thinker, and I'm very good at what I do. I've been in the forest industry, value-added manufacturing in particular, for, I can't believe it, but I left school when I was 13, and I started my education then. So that is 70 years of experience in Europe, Sweden, Canada, always in lumber and forest industry, but also in business, is saying what makes it tick, what makes it unique, what makes it different, and where are the opportunities. I always look for opportunities. Where can we go from here? Or recognizing when something doesn't work, and how do we turn it into a different direction?
Makes a lot of sense. And so, because a lot of times, you just mentioned that a lot of times in times of, maybe people think of recessions or the economy is tightening, a lot of times people contract, when really this is a great time to actually expand.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. And there's one of your chapters was called Enemy of the People in your book, Against All Odds. And the takeaway was, to do the right thing often comes at a price, but you do it anyway. And I read a story about when you had to challenge the industry status quo in 1986, about the international grading rules, I believe. And when I read it, it says nearly cost you your company. You rebuilt it even stronger and better than before. So what advice do you give for those at times who maybe struggle to stand up for something that they know is right, or to maybe voice their opinion, even if it's not with the majority of people?
That's delicate in a way for a lot of people, because I had no idea what I was encountering, the fraudulent grading rules of lumber. I thought it was local.
Mm-hmm.
Then it became regional. Then it was BC. Then it was Canada. And then it went from Florida to California, from Labrador to Alaska. It was a national, international, North American fraudulent grading rule set. I had no idea. And right from the beginning, obviously, been so much multi-billion dollars involved, it became something that they had to stop me. And so that included, it's all in the book, 5 arsons, and on and on and on, put me out of business and blah, blah. I lost everything that I had, and, pretty much, so I had no idea of the scope of it. Would I still do it today? Yes, I would, because I cannot stand in front of the mirror and look at myself and turn my head around in a different direction. And I can't do that, even not today. Would I do it exactly again? I had no idea. I had never been in a courtroom, never. Not even sit and all of a sudden, they had 16 lawyers from all the different associated parties there that were direct or indirectly involved. And I was there with one single lawyer. I was sitting on counsel table doing all the homework, and it is amazing, but it changed the industry. And so that's the example of, would I do exactly the same again today? Yes, I would, but I would do it differently because I understand it is different. Mm-hmm. But so do we stand up for principle? What else do you have other than credibility? What else do you have? Is it, if it is about money, money to me is not overly important. I want to make a living, but credibility, that you can stand up for something that you don't believe in, then you should be able to stand up. Like I'm sure with your listeners in the United States in particular, and that are not overly impressed with me saying that I'm pissed off about beating up on people 80 years and older. But I got to say that because that's how I feel about it. Mm-hmm. It's probably a misunderstanding on their part. They won't take me to court and do it. That's, but I'm basically saying, Julian, if you don't have the principles of what life is all about, what's the purpose of it? Mm-hmm. Simply, what's the purpose of it? Now, I know in a lot of cases where people see something happening and they turn their head around because they can't put at risk their house, their kids are going to university, and their career. And I'm not saying that not everybody is. I was fortunate that I had the ability, the attitude, and the never give up. And obviously, I learned a lot in a big hurry, and in a case like that. But I'm not suggesting that everybody should do that. I understand that. I would have done it differently. This is a good example of what it took and what it takes. But in most cases, if you have to stand up for what you believe in terms of principle, and that, I believe, is the message that I would have. Not to put everything at risk, that you have, because that I'm realistic enough in cases that you can't. But for me, it was important to do that. Would I do it again? Yes, I would. No question about that. Would I do it the same way? Not necessarily the same way. I would do it different. Why would it be my role, my job, to already have systems in place, both in the United States and in Canada, that would check those particular grading rules, that were aware of it? They knew it was a fraud and didn't say anything about it. And I don't accept that. And that's why it needs, from time to time, people to stand up and speak out. And in my case, it cost me everything that I had, but I started up again, and I didn't give up, and I built it even better and bigger. But that does not mean that I'm how do you call it, a litigator, or somebody that right away when something happens runs to court. I don't do that, Mm-hmm. So, but one thing is important to me, that I have to be able to, if I stand in front of that mirror or the last thing before I close my eyes to depart to wherever, die, then I would say, I did the right thing.
Mm-hmm. And that's most important. As long as you can look at yourself in the mirror, exactly. You can't lie on that. So, so I think that's one of the most powerful lessons that we had so far in the conversation. And as we get ready to start wrapping this up, I have to ask a question on the forestry industry, because I'm curious. What's your vision for the future when it comes to the forestry industry? In particular, let's say maybe one or two things that that you would like to see kind of ushered in or changing.
Right, because global, the forest industry is Canada, British Columbia, North America, and then the world. The forest industry has become a global industry, and it is directly tied to the carbon footprint is that the best thing for us to work with, changing the world in terms of it is clear that global warming is a major issue. We are moving towards changing it, but still not fast enough and far enough. Forest and lumber is one of the obvious materials that is most friendly to our global environment. And the more trees we grow, and the more we use it, and all it's beautiful for one, and it creates jobs. It's an economic driver, and both the United States and Canada have played major roles in it. But now it's become a global industry. So, to my people that are in the industry, what I would say is that add more value to the fiber. How can we use more of the things that we are using now? Is that I'm not using much plastic these days, because I think we can do better than plastics are not good for you, and change it, and searching for other ways of doing it by using natural products, in particular coming from the fiber that we grow, and grow more of it, use more applications of it, and it has great potential. But it is also changing as the global demands are changing, and I believe to pay attention to the global warming and the carbon footprint are critically important, and lumber and wood and fiber play a major role in that.
Okay. And the last question here is, someone walks up to you in a coffee shop and they ask you, what are 3 things that I can do today to start finding my passion while living the dream and ultimately succeeding against all odds? What would you tell them?
I would tell them what drove me, what is my foundation, is start with attitude. Do keep people away from me that have negative attitudes. I don't want to be around them. That happens sometimes, but I will just, my attitude. So attitude first. Change your attitude. Look around you. Say, how fortunate am I living in North America? With all the things that we have, on and on and on. Passion. Find somebody you like to do. Talk to people about it. What are you doing? How are you doing? Truck driver, welder, do whatever. It doesn't have to be multimillionaires, billionaires, whatever they are, so it's not nothing to do with that. It's liking things. Find something that you like to do. Believe in yourself. To young people, what I say is, in particular, young people, they feel so often, they say, well, this is wrong with me, and that is wrong with me. Everybody is beautiful. There is only one of you on this earth. Make sure, understand it to young people, girls, guys, whatever they are, that you are special and you are amazing individual. Believe in who you are and create that confidence that you are equal to everybody else. Opportunity is available to you. And then but believe in who you are and what you are. You are special. And then start from that. And then attitude, it's critically important. Give back to the community. Get involved in it. I grew up as part of the community. I've always, not even at the times that I was making $2 an hour, I was trying to be involved in the community, because it's part of how I grew up in Holland. And I still do that today. And, but for most young people in particular, I mean, say, this is not right, I don't look good, then this and that. You are special. You are unique. Believe that, and then from there, and then find something that you like to do. And we are all very good at things different than other people. Maybe find that area that makes you unique, and that you can in the morning do like I do. Get up in the morning and be excited what is ahead of you, because I live in the best country in the world, or continent in the world, North America. We are so lucky, so fortunate. And then every day is a blessing, so, and that's not based on religion, it's simply based on factual things, that I don't know, so that sort of thing.
That's a beautiful way to wrap this awesome conversation up. I Really, really appreciate it and enjoyed this conversation. Where can listeners, where can we keep up with your next few books and everything and all the adventures that you're having?
jonabrink.com.
All right. And I will have that in the show notes. I will also have links to his books. And, I look forward to seeing the next books that come out. And I also look forward in a few years to you winning at the competition. And so that's a lot of amazing things. So listeners out there, stay awesome, be limitless, and as always, go be the CEO of your health and your life. Peace.